It's Tuesday, January 6, 2026. Maduro arraigned, more big problems in Little Somalia, and multiple items of good news from the world of MAHA. Next on the AM Update. It took the better part of a week, but I finally figured out what year it is. Ousted Venezuelan leader Nicolás Maduro was defiant during a federal court arraignment on Monday in Lower Manhattan, where he appeared for the first time in public since he was captured 2 days earlier during a surprise U.S. military raid in Caracas. Maduro scribbled on a legal pad during much of the hearing notes. He requested that he be able to keep for future reference and spoke frequently in Spanish with his defense attorney, Barry Pollock. Pollock is a well-known defense lawyer whose list of former clients includes big names such as Julian Assange. Maduro and his wife, Celia Flores, were indicted in the Southern District of New York on federal charges that include narco-terrorism, conspiracy to import cocaine, and weapons-related charges. He said, quote, "I'm a decent man and I am innocent. I'm still president of my country." No, you're not, and you might not be alone for long. President Trump aboard Air Force One the other day said that Colombia's president, that would be the cross-dressing Gustavo Petro, may be next on the figurative chopping block.
And that's Venezuela's very sick. Colombia is very sick too, run by a sick man who likes making cocaine and selling it to the United States. And he's not going to be doing it very long, let me tell you.
What does that mean? He's not going to be doing it very long.
He's not doing it very long. He has cocaine mills and cocaine factories. He's not going to be doing it very long.
So there will be an operation by the U.S.
It sounds good to me.
There's President Trump discussing Colombia and its leadership, whether or not there will be an operation similar to what we saw in Venezuela. Both President Trump and Secretary of State Marco Rubio have made similar ovations regarding Cuba in recent days as well. Big news yesterday. Minnesota Governor Tim Walz, announced he's not actually going to be running for governor for reelection in 2026 after all. Here he is at a news conference yesterday morning.
I'm proud of the way we treat our neighbors. I'm proud of the way that we welcome people to this state. I'm proud of the way that we innovate. And I'm proud of the way that we are optimists for the future. No one's taking this away from us. Not the fraudsters. Certainly not this president. Not on my watch. Tomorrow, I'll be back with you. I'll give you an update on America's best paid family medical leave program that is now a week into it. And at that time, I'll take all your questions. Thank you all.
At that point, Tim Walz walks away from the podium without taking questions from a shocked press corps. I mean, you heard him mention there. That was the first thing he mentioned. We're not going to let the fraudsters take this away from us. He feels the heat. He feels it pretty bad right now. Having said that, though, you have to remember how Democrats, how communists operate. What is seen as a loss is actually seen as anything but in the eyes of a communist. What could be seen as an embarrassment to Tim Walz is an opportunity for Keith Ellison, who I'm sure would be bound and determined to make Tim Walz look like Ronald freaking Reagan. Of course, Keith Ellison, one of the most evil men in statewide politics in the entire country. I'm sure he would like to have a higher office of power as well. President Trump reacted to that as well, saying Minnesota's corrupt governor will possibly leave office before his term is up, but in any event, will not be running again because he was caught red-handed along with Ilhan Omar and others of his Somali friends stealing tens of billions of taxpayer dollars. I feel certain the facts will come out and they will reveal seriously unscrupulous and rich group of slime balls. Governor Walz has destroyed the state of Minnesota, but others like Governor Gavin Newsom, J.B. Pritzker, Kathy Hochul have done, in my opinion, even more dishonest and incompetent job. We'll see if the Department of Justice will take this low-hanging fruit from the state of Minnesota in the form of Tim Walz and run with it. I have my doubts. More big problems in Little Somalia. Hilton Hotels was in big doo-doo yesterday after one of their hotels in Minnesota found out that a group of Immigration and Customs Enforcement agencies and DHS law enforcement agents were planning to stay at one of their hotels in an effort during a part of an operation to increase deportation raids in the Gopher State. They got wind of this and sent an email wherein they said, quote, "After further investigation online, we have found information about immigration work connected with your name, and we will be canceling your upcoming reservation. You should see a proper cancellation email in your inbox shortly from Hilton." They put that in an email overtly saying, we're discriminating against you because of your work with immigration enforcement. Hilton, the big company, not just that franchise, later came out with a statement, quote, Hilton Hotels serves as welcoming places for all. This hotel is independently owned and operated, and the actions referenced are not reflective of Hilton values. We are investigating this matter with the individual hotel and can confirm that Hilton works with governments, law enforcement, and community leaders around the world to ensure our properties are open and inviting towards everyone. Interesting. There is a man by the name of William DeFore who goes by the name Julia, who was arrested in Cincinnati by the Secret Service after vandalizing JD Vance's, that would be Vice President JD Vance's, Ohio home. Just the latest example of trainee terror. JD Vance posted online, quote, I appreciate everyone's well wishes about the attack at our home. As far as I can tell, a crazy person tried to break in by hammering the windows. I'm grateful to the Secret Service and the Cincinnati police for responding quickly. We weren't even home as we had already returned to D.C. One request to the media, we try to protect our kids as much as possible from the realities of this life of public service. In that light, I'm skeptical of the news value of plastering images of our home with holes in the windows, as was done yesterday. So a trainee terrorist attempted to break into JD Vance's Cincinnati, Ohio home with a hammer, was arrested by Secret Service. Fortunately, the vice president was already gone. The Department of War is ramping up its efforts to punish Democrat Senator Mark Kelly of Arizona over his involvement in what President Trump and his administration have described as seditious actions in that video from a couple of months ago. At Secretary of War Pete Hegseth's direction, the department is set to cut Kelly's military retirement pay for an alleged pattern of reckless misconduct, namely the video of Democrat lawmakers calling for servicemen to disobey, quote-unquote, illegal orders from the president. The Department of War also issued a letter of censure to Kelly, which outlines the totality of Captain Kelly's reckless misconduct. Quote, 6 weeks ago, Senator Mark Kelly and 5 other members of Congress released a reckless and seditious video that was clearly intended to undermine good order and military discipline. As a retired Navy captain who is still receiving a military pension, Captain Kelly knows he is still accountable to military justice, and the Department of War and the American people expect justice. So there is Secretary of War Pete Hegseth in a statement outright calling the video that Mark Kelly appeared in, quote, seditious, and threatening to dock Kelly's rank, and is enacting a cut in Kelly's pension funding. That's all well and good, but if you're going to go out there in a statement in your official capacity as Secretary of War and call something that somebody is already involved with, Captain Kelly, if you're going to call that video seditious, you better follow through with more than just docking his pay. We go to the country of New York City, where Zohran Mamdani, just sworn in the other day, has already but is off to the races trying to enact his full-fledged communist policies. Here he is announcing, quote, rental ripoff hearings.
And I am also proud to announce that I will be signing an executive order directing HPD to work alongside the Department of Buildings, the newly invigorated Mayor's Office to Protect Tenants, the Department of Consumer and Worker Protection, and our newly created Office of Mass Engagement to hold rental ripoff hearings across all... We will hold these rental ripoff hearings across all 5 boroughs within the first 100 days of this administration.
Zohran Mamdani announcing rental ripoff hearings. So what is a ripoff? Well, of course, that's subjective, and that's the point. Meanwhile, Zohran Mamdani's newly announced tenant director, maybe that's a position that's been around in New York City for a while that I've just never heard of. His newly announced tenant director is C. Weaver. Here she is in a newly resurfaced video talking about this whole, fuzzy concept of property.
I think the reality is that for centuries we've really treated property as an individualized good and not a collective good, and we are going to transitioning to treating it as a collective good and towards a model of shared equity will require that we think about it differently, and it will mean that families, especially white families, but some POC families who are homeowners as well, are going to have a different relationship to property than the one that we currently have.
That is Zohran Mamdani's newly announced tenant director, C. Weaver, talking about this whole big old concept of property, saying whites will be especially impacted and their relationship with property will be re-examined. I'm kind of starting to wonder, are the communists blowing their wad on New York City? I mean, they've already had a socialist mayor. They're coming out full hammer and sickle already in New York City. But at the same time, I mean, they're announcing everything they want to do. That's basically seizing property right there. They just announced it. We want to seize property. And ripoff is one man's ripoff is another man's, good deal on rent. They're announcing who they are, hammer and sickle and all. But at the same time, they're not really going to be able to deliver anything because they're largely operating at a municipal level. And so they're not going to be able to seize property, yet they're coming out and messaging as if they are full-fledged, fully empowered communists. How is that going to work? Something to keep an eye on. Well, when we come back, a couple of items of legitimately good news out of the world of MAHA. Also, why are we funding this? It's coming up next.
I give the floor to the representative of Colombia.
Mr. President, Colombia would like to thank Somalia in your quality as President of the Security Council for having quickly responded to our request to convene this emergency meeting, as well as thanking China and Russia for their support.
So let me just recap what you just heard there. The United Nations Security Council held an urgent meeting yesterday on the topic of Venezuela. The individual presiding over that urgent meeting of the UK, or the UN, I should say, Security Council happens to be Somalia's UN ambassador, who then tosses it to Colombia's UN ambassador, who then thanks China and Russia for their attention in this matter. One country presiding over a council of countries that hate America. One country in particular who hates America right now, at least their leadership does, that would be Colombia, thanking two other countries who definitely hate America's guts in China and Russia. Let me ask you, why is the United States funding any of this? It's just a charade. Just a charade. I mean, you really have to think we hate ourselves if we continue to fund this. Children's Health Defense announced earlier this week, I should say, an urgent action item. There was a provision in a funding bill making its way through Congress that would have allowed pesticide companies to escape lawsuits. Congress was trying to sneak in a provision, Section 453, to wipe out your right to sue pesticide companies. It would have updated health warnings and given chemical manufacturers immunity even when people are harmed. Good news, yesterday, Children's Health Defense announced, that Section 453, that's been tossed from that upcoming funding bill. That's good news. Speaking to Children's Health Defense, here's Dr. Alexandra Munoz on why provisions like this are so pernicious and why it's so important things like this were blocked.
There's also been a lot of misinformation in this space in particular. These companies have had very aggressive PR campaigns, and they've gone so far as to ghostwrite papers in order to fabricate data about the safety of their products. And there's actually a really recent paper that was just retracted that was the foundation of a lot of their claims about safety of Roundup. This paper right here, the safety evaluation, the Williams 2000 paper, was just retracted back in November because there's substantial evidence showing that it was ghostwritten by the employees of Monsanto. And in their process of ghostwriting, and when you read these emails, they actually talk about how they want to avoid academics because they, create problems for them. They're avoiding this toxicologist because he was going to label it genotoxic. And instead, they have their own employees write those sections. And then they talk about not including them on the paper because it would make it look like it wasn't independent. And so it's a very was a very formulated paper to serve as the sort of the reference for glyphosate safety, for Roundup safety, to promote their sales throughout the country, to serve as the basis for regulatory decisions. And so the EPA-approved label for Roundup is based in part on this retracted study.
So there is Dr. Alexandra Munoz talking to Children's Health Defense TV with just one example of why some of these provisions and bills that are trying to be snuck in to absolve chemical and pesticide companies from any sort of liability, why that's so important, because they are trying their darndest to get around any sort of liability for any harms their products could cause. In my home state of Iowa, we just had a similar thing just last year. These big ag companies trying to sneak in these provisions into bills, even at the state level. And why would you do that? I understand, yes, we live in a way too overly litigated society, and a very punitive one at that. But when it comes to what you're putting into people's bodies, you do need to bear some responsibility for that, especially if you're making claims based on faulty research like what we just heard from. Also good news yesterday, after a review of peer countries, Centers for Disease Control is dropping routine recommendations for 5 vaccines: hepatitis B, rotavirus, MenACWY, hepatitis A, and the flu vaccine. CDC said in press release, the assessment reviewed 20 peer-developed nations and found that the United States is a global outlier among developed nations in both the number of diseases addressed in its routine childhood vaccination schedule and the total number of recommended doses, but does not have higher vaccination rates than such countries. In fact, many peer nations that recommend fewer routine vaccines achieve strong child health outcomes and maintain high vaccination rates through public trust and education rather than mandates. So that is good news. A continued narrowing down of the absolutely bonkers childhood vaccination schedule that the United States has experienced for seemingly so long. President Trump, once again on Truth Social yesterday, issued a warning for pregnant women, saying, quote, "Pregnant women, do not use Tylenol unless absolutely necessary. Don't give Tylenol to your young child for virtually any reason. Break up the MMR shot into 3 totally separate shots, not mixed. Take chicken pox shots separately. Take hepatitis B shot at 12 years old or older. And importantly, take vaccine in 5 separate medical visits." Somebody or somebody's, the right somebody's, seem to be, for now, in the ear of President Trump on the issue of vaccines, particularly the childhood schedule. And finally, air analysis, slightly acidic, mostly necessary. Let's go back to around Christmas time, where Tucker Carlson gave an interview with the American Conservative, where he discussed, in part, the poll that emerged from AmFest, which I was privileged to attend back a couple of weeks ago, showing that the number one concern of attendees was the rise of radical Islam. Listen to this.
TPUSA did a poll during AmFest, or I guess it was after AmFest, and they asked the audience, what they considered to be the greatest threat to America. And they did put radical Islam at number 1. I'm wondering where you think those sentiments are coming from. I mean, I've heard you say before that this is an op, and that we all know which foreign government it's actually coming from. Which government is it, and can you explain how that operation works? How is it, kind of lured into those?
From the Israeli government and its many defenders and informal employees in the United States, of course. And I guess I would just say if that was actually, I don't know how people responded to the poll, I don't know who answered it, but, I believe in measuring reality a little more empirically. And, I don't know anyone in the United States in the last 24 years who's been killed by radical Islam.
2009, the Fort Hood shooting. 2013, the Boston Marathon bombing. 2015, the San Bernardino attack. 2016, the Pulse nightclub shooting. 2017, New York City truck attack. 2019, Naval Air Station Pensacola and that shooting. 2025, the New Orleans truck attack that happened on New Year's Day. In 2025, the Boulder, Colorado flamethrower attack against Jews. 2025, the National Guard shooting as well. Those are just 3 just last year, and that's not a comprehensive list at all. I don't know what's going on with Tucker Carlson. I've given him maximum benefit of the doubt so far. If you want to listen to his show for the guests and just exploring what they believe, I just listened to an entire episode of Tucker Carlson just a few weeks ago with that molecular biologist. Just an incredible story. Somebody who is at the forefront of his field. in molecular biology, the building blocks of creation, who basically said, the more I study this, the more I am in awe and enamored with God, the God of the Bible. A fantastic conversation. I think there's value in Tucker Carlson for the guests that he has. Sometimes. Maybe even more most of the time. But in terms of what Tucker Carlson is going through personally with his own worldview, he's all over the place. Just all over the place. And it's unfortunate because he's got a big platform. I think he just needs a lot of prayer. A lot of prayer and maybe a few more doses of reality and humility at the same time. Because that's a dude I don't think that really needs the grift money. Not saying that he's running a grift. He's just not somebody who needs that. I mean, he married into a fortune. He's not somebody who's motivated by that. I don't think he's even motivated by, being paid off by Qatar or Russia or anything like that. I just think he's weird and all over the place, chaotic from a worldview perspective. That's going to do it for a Tuesday. Hope you have a wonderful day. Back at it again tomorrow. I'm Aaron McIntyre, and this is the AM Update.